My name is Elise Moreau. I am 30 years old, and I work as an emergency physician at Saint-Vincent Hospital in Paris. In just 2 weeks, I was supposed to walk down the aisle and marry Antoine Dubois, the man I had loved faithfully for 4 years. I had imagined the day so vividly, the church bells, the vows, the quiet certainty that love would carry us through life's storms. But all of that unraveled in the most ordinary of places, a small café tucked into a corner of Montmartre. The air was filled with the faint strains of a violin from a nearby street performer, and the sweet aroma of freshly baked croissants lingered in the room. It should have been a setting for warmth and tenderness. Instead, Antoine looked at me with eyes colder than winter rain. He paused, then uttered the words that shattered everything. "We need to talk." If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. I hadn't even taken my seat when Antoine placed a small velvet box on the table. It wasn't a gift. It was a reclamation. Inside was the heirloom ring his family had entrusted to me when we became engaged. My pulse quickened, but his voice remained flat, almost rehearsed. "Elise," he said, his tone stripped of affection, "I can't marry you. Claire Beaumont and I, we fit better together. You deserve someone simpler." The name struck like a blade. Claire Beaumont, daughter of Philippe Beaumont, the financial titan whose empire of private banks stretched across Europe. Of course. Power, prestige, the kind of family name that could open any door Antoine had ever dreamed of. For a moment, the cafe blurred. The violin outside still played, the croissants still perfumed the air, but inside me, everything went silent. I slipped the ring off my finger with a steadiness I did not feel, set it gently on the table, and stood. Not a word. Not a scene. Only the sound of my heels against the tiled floor as I walked out, keeping my tears locked behind a fragile mask until I turned the corner. There, out of sight, they spilled freely, hot and relentless. I didn't return to our apartment in Le Marais, though half-packed wedding boxes still waited. When I arrived, I found the decision had already been made for me. My belongings were neatly arranged in suitcases, his mother's efficient hand, no doubt. She had never thought I was enough for her son. To her, I was merely a doctor from an ordinary family, lacking pedigree, lacking the refinement of a Beaumont. Standing in that hollowed-out space, I realized I had been erased from his life in less than a day. No explanations beyond a scripted cruelty. No second chance. I checked my bank account. Fewer than 100 euros stared back at me, barely enough for a train ticket and a meal. Paris, once my city of light, suddenly felt suffocating. My hand shook as I reached for my phone. There was only one person I could call. "Madame Colette Laurent," I whispered as the line rang. My foster mother. A woman whose gentleness had raised me, whose quiet strength had steadied me through the hardest years of my childhood. She lived in the outskirts of Lyon, far from the polished cruelty of Parisian salons. When she answered, her voice was as warm as I remembered. And for the first time since Montmartre, I let myself breathe. Colette welcomed me into her small home with a lavender garden stretching just beyond the gate. The air was thick with its calming scent, as though the earth itself wanted to cradle me. She didn't ask a single question. Instead, she brewed a pot of mint tea, placed it gently in my hands, and covered me with a woolen blanket. "Stay as long as you need, my dear," she said softly, brushing a strand of hair from my face. That night, sleep abandoned me. I lay on the sofa, staring at the ceiling beams of her cottage, listening to the silence of the countryside. My thoughts circled endlessly. Had Antoine ever loved me, or had I simply been a placeholder, a convenient figure until someone like Claire appeared? The ache in my chest transformed slowly into shame. How could I, a doctor who had pulled strangers back from the edge of death in chaotic emergency rooms, now find myself stripped of everything, no home, no love, no future I could grasp? 3 days later, I returned to St. Vincent for a shift. My hands performed their duties mechanically, stitching wounds, monitoring vitals, masking the turmoil inside me. Yet Sophie, one of the sharpest nurses on the floor, saw through me as if I were made of glass. She pulled me into the hallway, her voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper. "You still want out of here, don't you?" Her eyes glittered with a kind of reckless candor I'd always admired. I frowned. Out of Paris? Out of this mess? I don't even know anymore. She leaned closer. "There's a position. Private care. Tuscany. Pays 3 times more than the hospital. Room and board included." I blinked, startled. "Tuscany?" Sophie nodded. "The patient's a wealthy man, paralyzed after an accident. But he's notorious. Goes through nurses like sand through a sieve. They say he fires them all within 2 weeks." Her lips twisted into a half smile. "But you're stubborn, Elise. You don't scare easily. Maybe you'd blast." Her words sank into me. A week ago, I had been preparing to marry into a life of certainty. Now I stood with nothing but a battered suitcase and my profession. What did I have to lose? That evening, with trembling fingers, I dialed the number Sophie gave me. A woman answered. Her voice was clipped, almost severe. "This is Madame Isabelle Fournier, housekeeper of the estate. Are you available for an interview tomorrow morning?" "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the swiftness of my reply. The next morning, I boarded a flight from Paris to Florence. The weight of the city I had once called home seemed to lift as the plane ascended, leaving behind cobblestone streets and memories I could no longer bear. From Florence Airport, a black car awaited me. The driver spoke little, navigating narrow roads that twisted like ribbons through the Tuscan hills. Vineyards stretched endlessly on both sides, golden in the afternoon sun, while olive groves dotted the landscape. The world looked painted, serene, so far removed from the chaos of Paris and the shards of my broken engagement. As the car climbed higher, the outline of a grand villa came into view, perched atop the hill like a sentinel watching over the valley. My heart thudded. Somewhere inside those walls awaited a man who could change or shatter whatever remained of my future. The villa rose before me like a Renaissance fortress, its stone walls weathered by centuries yet still imposing, its arched windows gazing over the endless vineyards as if they had witnessed generations come and go. The iron gates creaked open, and there stood Isabelle, the housekeeper. She was a woman in her 60s. Her hair pulled into a severe bun that revealed a face lined not only by age but by discipline. She wasted no time on pleasantries. At the entrance, her sharp eyes swept over me as if measuring every flaw and strength. The interview was brisk, almost clinical, no talk of my personal life, only a handful of questions about my medical experience, my resilience during long shifts, my ability to manage difficult patients. When she finally spoke in full, her tone was firm, almost militaristic. "Your assignment is to care for Monsieur Luca Moretti. Salary, €15,000 per month with additional bonuses depending on his recovery. There is one condition above all, absolute discretion. Do you understand?" I nodded without hesitation. The sum was staggering, far beyond what I had ever earned in Paris, and yet it was not the money alone that compelled me. It was the chance to step into a new life, to place distance between myself and the ruins Antoine had left behind. The following day, I signed the contract with a trembling hand. By evening, my belongings had been moved into a lavish guest suite within the villa, high ceilings, frescoed walls, and a window that opened to the rolling Tuscan hills. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to exhale. but the name Luca Moretti hung in the air like a storm cloud. He was only 35, yet his reputation preceded him. A former Formula One prodigy, once the blazing star of Ferrari, his career had ended abruptly in Monaco. Crash had been broadcast around the world, metal shrieking, tires skidding, flames licking at the track. He had survived, but survival came at a price: paralysis from the waist down. Now, confined to this villa, he was said to be volatile, proud, impossible to manage. Dozens of nurses had come and gone, defeated by his sharp tongue and colder silences. And soon it would be my turn to step into the shadows of his broken empire. The first time I saw him, I froze. He was nothing like the frail, bedridden figure I had imagined. Luca Moretti was tall, his shoulders still broad despite the wheelchair. His dark brown hair fell slightly across his forehead, and his eyes, icy blue, sharp as blades, met mine with a mixture of weariness and defiance. He looked less like a patient and more like a fallen king, stripped of his throne but not his pride. "Another one," he muttered, his lips curling in a bitter half-smile. "How long do you think you'll last? A week?" I steadied my voice. "I'm not here to gamble, Monsieur Moretti. I'm here to work." For a moment, silence stretched between us. Then he gave a short, humorless laugh and turned his chair toward the window, dismissing me as if I were already halfway out the door. The following days were a test. Luca wielded sarcasm like a weapon, tossing barbed remarks at every effort I made. He mocked the way I adjusted his wheelchair, scoffed at the exercises I suggested, and questioned whether I had any idea what it meant to endure real pain. But I had stood in emergency rooms drenched in chaos, stitching wounds while families wailed in the corridors. I had faced men on the brink of death, cursing the world with every ounce of strength left in them. Compared to that, Luca's bitterness was sharp but survivable. Each time he tried to provoke me, I met his words with calm precision. I didn't flinch. I didn't retreat. And though he hid it well, I caught something flicker in his eyes during those first encounters, a reluctant curiosity, as though he was testing to see if I would break like the others. One night, as the wind howled against the old shutters and the villa groaned with its centuries of history, I noticed a sliver of light seeping out from beneath the door at the far end of the corridor. It was late, too late for anyone but the house staff to be awake. Curiosity tugged at me, and I followed it, my footsteps soft against the stone floor. The door led to Luca's private gym. When I pushed it open, my breath caught in my throat. There he was, not seated in his wheelchair, not broken as the world assumed, but upright. He gripped the parallel bars with white-knuckled intensity, his arms straining, his face slick with sweat. His legs trembled violently, each movement jerky, precarious, yet driven by sheer willpower. Inch by inch, he forced himself forward. It was raw, brutal, beautiful. When he noticed me, his head snapped up, his expression twisted with rage. "Get out," he roared, his voice echoing through the cavernous room. But I didn't move. I stood rooted, my heart pounding, not with fear but with recognition. I had seen men fight for their lives before, but this was different. This was a man fighting for his identity. "Why are you hiding this?" I asked softly. For a moment, silence hung heavy between us. Then his eyes dropped, his voice rough. "Because if they see me trying, they'll expect me to recover. And when I fail, it'll be worse than never trying at all." His confession was stripped bare, without the armor of sarcasm or bitterness. I stepped closer, careful not to pity him. "You don't have to do this alone," I said. "Let me help you. Not as a nurse. As someone who refuses to give up on you." His jaw tightened, but he didn't protest when I positioned myself near the bars. And so it began, our secret ritual. Every dawn, before sunlight spilled across the vineyards, we trained. I studied the bars when his grip faltered, adjusted his stance when his knees buckled. I never cheered or clapped. I never told him, "You can do it," like a child. I simply stood there, unwavering, a constant presence as he battled his own body. And something shifted. His barbs softened. The hostility that once marked every word slowly gave way to conversation. He told me about the accident in Monaco, the reckless overtaking maneuver, the screech of tires, the violent spin, the moment he woke to find two legs that no longer obeyed him. "I used to be the fastest man on earth," he whispered once, his voice hollow. "Now, what am I?" I met his gaze. "You're still the man who refuses to stop moving forward. That's something most people will never understand." For the first time, Luca didn't look at me with bitterness. He looked at me with something closer to respect, fragile, hesitant, but real. It happened on a late afternoon when the villa was hushed and only the cicadas sang outside. I had gone in search of Luca, following the murmur of voices down the marble hall. The study door was slightly ajar, and I froze when I recognized the names that slipped through the crack. Inside sat Luca, his posture tense in his wheelchair, facing a man who exuded wealth and insincerity in equal measure. Giovanni Rossi, a business associate I had seen once before, with his gleaming gold watch and polished shoes. His smile never reached his eyes. "Luca," Giovanni said smoothly, sliding a folder across the desk, "this partnership with Beaumont Capital is your future. All it takes is a signature. You'll secure funding, international expansion. Moretti Motors will thrive without the burden of your limitations." The name hit me like a shard of glass. Beaumont. I didn't hear the rest. My chest constricted as if Paris itself had found me here in Tuscany. Claire Beaumont, the woman who had stolen Antoine, the daughter of Philippe Beaumont. Their empire now extended its shadow into Luca's world too. That evening, when Giovanni had left and the villa settled back into silence, I told Luca everything. About Antoine. About Claire. About how the Beaumont name had already torn my life apart. My voice shook, but I forced the words out because he needed to know. Luca studied me for a long while, his piercing eyes unreadable. Then, with a quiet determination, he said, "I'll review the documents." The next days blurred into strategy. Papers spread across Luca's desk, financial records dissected line by line. What emerged was a scheme. Giovanni and Beaumont Capital had established a shell corporation, designed to siphon control of Moretti Motors once Luca's signature gave them authority. It wasn't a partnership, it was a theft in elegant disguise. Anger sharpened Luca's features, but there was steel beneath it too. He had not survived Monaco's fire to surrender his legacy to vultures. Together, we devised a plan. Dawn and dusk, between his training sessions, we whispered over contracts and exchanged notes with lawyers discreetly contacted from Milan. I sifted through correspondence, highlighting irregularities, while Luca dictated responses with precise, deliberate venom masked as compliance. Finally, Luca agreed to Giovanni's request. He would sign, but on his terms. The meeting was arranged in the grand salon of the villa, the golden afternoon light pouring through arched windows. Giovanni arrived with his oily charm, papers neatly stacked, certain victory glittering in his eyes. Luca rolled forward, pen in hand, every inch the cooperative partner. He smiled, cold, controlled, the smile of a man who knows more than he reveals. Giovanni leaned closer, oblivious to the trap. The ink flowed across the page, but behind it, another plan was already in motion. That evening, I sat across from Luca, the soft glow of the kitchen light catching the fine lines of resilience etched on his face. The velvet box lay open between us, the golden ring with its sapphire gleaming quietly, not ostentatious, but heavy with everything we had endured together. I didn't cry. My tears had long been spent on battles, betrayals, and losses. What rose inside me instead was a calmness, a steady warmth that spread through my chest as though for the first time in years I could truly breathe. I didn't answer right away. My hand closed the little box and rested it gently in Luca's palm. His fingers curled around it, steady and patient, as if he already knew my silence was not rejection but reflection. When I looked into his gray-blue eyes, I didn't see a man asking for rescue, nor a broken figure searching for pity. I saw the man who had walked into the council chamber on a cane and faced down his enemies with dignity. I saw someone who had reclaimed himself and, in doing so, had helped me reclaim myself. The days that followed carried a new rhythm. The villa no longer echoed with cold suspicion but with laughter, music, and the occasional clatter of Luca's well-meaning but disastrous attempts at cooking. Sometimes I would find him in the library, tracing old family crests on faded parchment as if reaffirming his roots. Other times, he would sit in the garden, sketching outlines of new vineyards he dreamed of planting, his hand trembling slightly but his spirit unwavering. I would jog past the fields of sunflowers, their golden heads bowing in unison, and feel the weight of old heartbreaks lifting with every step. Antoine's shadow no longer haunted me. For too long I had measured my worth by his attention, only to discover his cowardice when I needed him most. Now, when his name drifted into conversation, it was like hearing a story about someone I used to know, distant and unimportant. Pain had dulled into a scar, visible if I chose to look, but no longer bleeding. One evening, we sat by the fireplace, a book half forgotten in my lap while Luca nursed a glass of red wine. The flames painted his face with shades of amber and gold. He was telling me about a vineyard in Siena that once produced a wine so rare it was served only to dukes. His voice, gravelly yet warm, carried a reverence for the past but also a daring for the future. Then he paused, his eyes softening. "You know," he said, swirling the glass, "when I was lying in that hospital bed, I thought I had lost everything. My body, my company, my pride. But then you walked in, not asking who I had been, but reminding me who I still was. You saw me when I couldn't even see myself." I smiled faintly, touched but unsure of how to respond. Before I could find words, he set the glass aside, reached into his pocket, and placed the box once again on the table between us. "This isn't about saving me," he said quietly. "It's about choosing each other. I don't need an answer tonight or tomorrow or even next year. I only want you to know that with you, the world feels alive again. And if one day you feel the same, then we will walk forward together, not as two broken halves, but as two whole people who found strength in the storm." The fire crackled, filling the silence that followed. I reached out, this time not to close the box but to rest my hand lightly over his. His skin was warm, his grip gentle yet grounding. I realized then that my journey wasn't about rushing toward another commitment or defining myself through someone else's promises. It was about standing steady, knowing that if I chose Luca, it would be from a place of freedom, not desperation. I didn't cry because there was nothing left to grieve. What I felt instead was possibility, fragile, tentative, but real. Sighed, the wind rustled through the cypress trees, carrying with it the scent of earth and night-blooming jasmine. Florence stretched beyond the hills, its history a reminder that even the grandest cities had been built, destroyed, and rebuilt again. Perhaps love was not so different. For now, I only whispered, "Thank you, Luca." And that was enough. I slipped the ring onto my finger, studying the sapphire as it caught the light. Glimmered like a secret held between us, not yet spoken aloud. "I'm not saying yes," I murmured, my voice steady, "but I'm not saying no either." For a moment, silence hung in the air, and then Luca's lips curved into a rare, genuine smile. Not the calculated charm he had worn for investors or journalists, but something deeper, unguarded, an expression I had seen only when he let the weight of survival fall from his shoulders. That smile told me he understood. We were not rushing. We were not clinging out of fear. We were choosing patience, and in patience there was strength. The months that followed unfolded with surprising ease. Autumn came to Florence, bringing with it crisp mornings and streets scattered with golden leaves. By then, Luca had learned to walk without his cane. The first time he crossed the courtyard unaided, his steps deliberate but steady, I felt a swell of pride so fierce it nearly brought me to tears. He lifted his chin, not in arrogance but in quiet triumph, and I knew he had reclaimed more than mobility. He had reclaimed himself. Meanwhile, I carved out my own path. I opened a small clinic in the city, tucked between a bakery and a bookshop. The smell of fresh bread greeted me each morning as I unlocked the door, and the sight of my name etched on the glass filled me with a sense of ownership I hadn't realized I craved. Patients trickled in, some nervous, some weary, all searching for relief. Each day reminded me that I was no longer defined by abandonment or betrayal. I was building something of my own, brick by brick, heartbeat by heartbeat. Antoine's name appeared on my phone once, twice, short messages asking how I was, if we could talk. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I never replied. There was nothing left to say. His absence no longer felt like an open wound, but like a door that had finally closed. In that silence, I found peace. And with Luca, life gained texture. We learned the rhythms of each other's days, the way he rose early to read the paper while I lingered in bed, the way I hummed to myself while cooking and he teased me for being out of tune. Sometimes we argued, not about grand betrayals or hidden schemes, but about whether the garden needed more roses or whether I worked too many hours. These small conflicts, ordinary and human, grounded us in a reality far more precious than the drama we had survived. One afternoon, months later, we stood on the cliffs of the Amalfi Coast, the sea stretching endlessly before us. The water shimmered with shifting blues, waves rolling in with the steady rhythm of time itself. Luca's hand found mine, his grip warm and sure. He gazed at the horizon, his expression caught between wonder and melancholy. "Do you think," he asked softly, "we will ever be the people we were before?" Question lingered in the salt-tinged air, carrying with it memories of who we had once been, the broken man in a hospital bed, the woman hollowed out by betrayal. I turned to him, my hair brushing against my face in the breeze. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I hope not. Because the people we've become now are so much better." He studied me, his eyes searching mine for truth, and when he saw it, his features softened. His thumb brushed over my knuckles, a gesture tender and unassuming, and in that touch lay a promise stronger than any vow. Not a return to what was lost, but a step forward into what we had built from the ashes. The sea roared beneath us, eternal and untamed. I realized then that life was not about restoring the past or clinging to what had slipped away. It was about transformation, about taking the broken pieces and shaping them into something new, something stronger. Standing there, hand in hand, I knew neither of us was searching for rescue anymore. We had already been found. And the future, uncertain yet luminous, stretched before us like the horizon itself. When I look back on everything, the betrayal, the exile, the hidden battles, and the unexpected love, I realize there are lessons worth sharing. Maybe they will help someone who is standing where I once stood, wondering if life can begin again after it all falls apart. Lesson 1. Your value does not disappear because someone fails to see it. Antoine's rejection felt like the end of me, but in truth, it was only the end of an illusion. Once I stopped measuring myself through his eyes, I began to discover my own worth again. Lesson 2. Strength often hides in patience. Healing, whether physical like Luca's or emotional like mine, does not come overnight. We grew stronger not by rushing, but by showing up every day, taking one more step than the day before. Lesson 3. The people who remain when you have nothing are the ones who truly matter. Colette's quiet shelter, Sophie's candid push, and Luca's stubborn fight reminded me that true connection is not about grandeur, but about presence. Lesson 4. Your past is not a prison, but a teacher. I could have carried Antoine's betrayal like chains forever. Instead, I chose to let it shape me into someone wiser, someone who would never again settle for being half seen. Lesson 5. Love should not rescue you, it should remind you of who you already are. With Luca, I was not a savior and he was not a burden. We simply stood side by side, two flawed people choosing to grow together. So if you're listening to this, remember, even in your darkest season, seeds are being planted for a brighter tomorrow. If my story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories find those who need them most. Together, we can keep reminding each other that healing and hope are always possible.